He came to a blind date dressed like a beggar, but the billionaire woman across the table didn't see his clothes. She saw his heart. What happened next will leave you speechless. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments. Where in the world are you watching? Rain drizzled softly over the city, turning every reflection into a blurred memory. Inside a small, grease-stained workshop on the edge of downtown, Noah Carter wiped his hands on an old rag, unaware that tonight would change his life forever. His shirt was splattered with oil, his jeans torn at the knees, and his boots, once brown, were now an indistinguishable mix of black and grey. The world had been cruel lately. His auto garage was weeks away from shutting down, the bills stacked higher than the tires that lined the wall, and yet somehow he was still fixing a stranger's truck that had broken down outside. Because that's what Noah did. He helped, even when he had nothing left to give. The old man he'd rescued thanked him with a cracked smile and a handshake. But by the time Noah looked at his watch, his heart sank. He was late. His friend Luke had begged him for days to go on this blind date. "She's different, man," Luke had said. "Just one dinner. What's the worst that could happen?" Noah had laughed at that. He didn't belong in restaurants where people wore ties and polished shoes. But Luke had insisted, claiming it was about time Noah met someone who reminded him that life could still be kind. So now, half an hour late, Noah looked at his reflection in the cracked mirror by the garage door. His hair was a mess, his stubble uneven, and his shirt bore a tear near the shoulder. He looked nothing like a man ready for a date. He almost didn't go. But something inside whispered, "You've faced worse than rejection." So he grabbed his jacket, one that had seen too many winters, and stepped out into the cold evening rain. Across the city, Evelyn Hartman sat at a table by the window of a 5-star restaurant, the kind where silence was considered elegance. Every eye that entered was measured, every whisper laced with judgment. She wore a sleek emerald dress, her hair pulled back in a neat twist, the only sign of exhaustion being the faint shadows beneath her eyes. At 41, Evelyn was the kind of woman people either admired or feared, a billionaire businesswoman known for her composure and brilliance. Yet tonight she felt strangely small. She glanced at the clock again. Her date was 35 minutes late. Her assistant had arranged this dinner, swearing that Evelyn needed to meet someone normal. After years of cold meetings and shallow conversations, Evelyn had agreed, mostly out of curiosity. But as the rain tapped against the window and the waiter refilled her untouched glass, she started to think it was another mistake. Maybe she wasn't meant for companionship anymore. Maybe power and loneliness came as a pair. And then the restaurant doors opened. A man stepped in, dripping water onto the marble floor. Conversations paused. Every head turned slightly, the air thick with quiet disapproval. The maitre d' rushed forward, ready to escort the intruder out. But the man held up a hand and said softly, "I'm looking for someone. Evelyn Hartman." The staff hesitated, shocked that this man, this grease-stained stranger, could possibly be meeting her. Evelyn looked up, and in that moment, the world tilted. There was something disarming about the man standing there, worn, tired, completely out of place, yet unashamed. His eyes met hers, and for a brief second, she forgot the room, the stairs, the rules. Those eyes held something rare, honesty, a kind of humble strength she hadn't seen in years. The maitre d' turned toward her questioningly, but Evelyn nodded. "He's my guest," she said firmly, silencing the whispers. Noah exhaled, relief flickering across his face, and walked toward her. The wet floor squeaked beneath his boots, a reminder of how wrong he looked here. When he reached the table, he smiled awkwardly. "I owe you an apology. My clothes weren't exactly planned for fine dining." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Neither was your timing," he chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "A truck broke down on the highway. I couldn't just drive past. Guess I lost track of time." Her lips parted slightly, caught between surprise and amusement. "Most people would have left the truck and come here first." "Yeah, well, most people aren't me." They both laughed quietly, and just like that, the tension began to fade. Noah sat down, still damp from the rain, while Evelyn signaled for another glass. The waiter hesitated, but one sharp look from her sent him moving. When he was gone, Evelyn leaned forward. "So Noah Carter, mechanic, right?" "Former mechanic," he corrected. "Soon-to-be ex-owner of a dying garage. I fix cars and occasionally break hearts." He grinned, then added quickly, "That last part's mostly a rumor." Evelyn smiled despite herself. "And you came to a place like this dressed like that?" He shrugged. "Didn't have time to change. Besides, figured it's better to show up looking real than not show up at all." Something in those words tugged at her. Real. The word echoed in her chest like a forgotten song. "That's a rare philosophy," she said softly. "Most people spend years pretending to be someone they're not. Maybe that's why most people end up miserable," he replied. The conversation drifted easily after that. They talked about simple things: music, food, memories that didn't involve boardrooms or bank accounts. Noah told her about his garage, about the kids he taught there who reminded him why fixing broken things mattered. Evelyn found herself listening, really listening, something she hadn't done in a long time. The sound of his voice was steady and warm, like rain on glass. Halfway through dinner, she asked him a question no one else ever dared to. "Do you know who I am?" He looked up from his plate, confused. "Evelyn Hartman. My friend said you run some kind of company." She almost laughed. "Some kind of company," she repeated. "Hartman Global. We build tech for corporations, governments, even hospitals." Noah whistled low. "So basically, you could buy my garage with your pocket change." She tilted her head. "Would that bother you?" He thought for a moment, then said, "Only if you tried to change what makes it mine." Evelyn's chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that, without awe, without calculation. Just truth, pure and uncluttered. She studied him, noticing the roughness of his hands, the small scar near his temple, the calm in his eyes that came from surviving more storms than he could count. "You're not intimidated," she said finally. He smiled. "Should I be? Most people are. I'm not most people." Their eyes locked again, and for a long moment neither spoke. Around them, the restaurant continued in its quiet rhythm, but the space between them had shifted. It was no longer a blind date. It was two souls, recognizing something familiar in each other's weariness. After dessert, which neither of them really ate, Noah looked down at his soaked sleeves and said, "I should probably go before they kick me out for lowering the restaurant's image." Evelyn smiled faintly. "You may have improved it, actually." Not sure they'd agree. "I'm not sure I care." He stood hesitant. "You don't have to pretend, you know. I get that I'm not what you expected." Evelyn rose too, her expression softer now. "You're right. You're not what I expected. You're better." She paused, then added, "Would you like to meet again? Somewhere less polished?" Noah blinked. "You mean like my garage?" "You might get oil on that dress," she laughed, a sound she hadn't made in months. "Maybe I'm ready for that." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right then. My garage, tomorrow evening." "Tomorrow evening," she repeated. Her gaze lingered as he turned to leave, water still dripping from his jacket. The maitre d' looked horrified, the diners whispered, but Evelyn didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt something real stirring inside her, a spark that wasn't lit by success or wealth, but by authenticity. Outside, the rain fell harder, drumming against the glass. Evelyn watched him walk into the night, disappearing beneath the streetlight's halo. Somewhere deep in her chest, she knew this was only the beginning of something she couldn't yet name, something raw, inconvenient, and absolutely real. And as she sat back down, the waiter approached timidly. "Should I clear your table, ma'am?" She shook her head, still looking out the window where Noah had vanished. "No," she said quietly. "Leave it. He might come back." The waiter nodded and left, but Evelyn barely noticed. Her heart was somewhere out in the rain, with a man who showed up dressed like a beggar, yet somehow made her feel richer than she'd ever been. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the high glass windows of Evelyn's penthouse, scattering golden reflections across polished marble floors. But even that familiar luxury couldn't quiet her restless thoughts. She sat on the edge of her bed, her emerald robe draped loosely around her shoulders, staring at the city skyline. Her reflection in the mirror looked composed as ever. Perfect hair, perfect posture, but inside, something had shifted. She'd spent decades surrounded by powerful men who bowed to her influence, investors who measured her worth by the size of her empire. But last night, a man with dirt under his nails and honesty in his eyes had looked at her, not as a billionaire, not as a brand, but as a person. It unsettled her. And strangely, she liked it. Her assistant Maya walked in holding a stack of documents. "Good morning, Ms. Hartman. You have 3 meetings before noon. The board wants your signature on the expansion proposal." "And Maya?" Evelyn interrupted softly. "Cancel everything." Maya blinked, startled. "Everything?" "Yes, everything." Evelyn stood, tying her robe. "I have somewhere I need to be." An hour later, her sleek black car pulled up to a side street that most of her colleagues wouldn't dare drive through. The road was uneven. The paint on the shop signs faded, and the air smelled faintly of oil and dust. But to Evelyn it felt alive, messy, noisy, human. She stepped out of the car, drawing a few curious stares as her heels clicked against the cracked pavement. The garage sat at the end of the street, an old structure with rusted signage that read Carter Auto Repairs. Through the half-open shutters, she could hear laughter, young, unpolished, genuine. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. Inside, Noah was kneeling beside a teenage boy, guiding his hands over a broken motorbike engine. No, gentle with the wrench, Tyler. You're forcing it. Machines have rhythm, you just have to listen, the boy grinned. Like music? Exactly, Noah said with a smile. Except this kind of music gets you dirty. Evelyn stood quietly in the doorway, unnoticed, watching him move. His voice carried warmth, his patience was endless. Around him were 6 kids, all wearing grease-stained clothes, laughing as they worked. It wasn't just a garage, it was a classroom, a sanctuary. When Noah finally saw her, he froze mid-sentence. "Evelyn, you actually came?" She smiled faintly. "You invited me?" "Yeah, but I didn't think you'd show up. Most people don't come back once they see what this place looks like." "Well," she said, glancing around, "I've seen boardrooms with fancier furniture, but none with this much heart." Noah wiped his hands on a rag, embarrassed. "Sorry about the mess. Don't be. It suits you," he laughed, shaking his head. "That's not the compliment you think it is?" Evelyn stepped closer, studying the space. Every wall told a story, photos of smiling kids, certificates, an old radio playing faintly in the corner. "You teach them for free?" "Yeah," he said. "Most of these kids dropped out or don't have anywhere else to go. I figure if I can keep them busy learning engines, they'll stay out of trouble. Fixing things makes them believe they can fix themselves too." She turned to him, her expression softening. "That's extraordinary," he shrugged. "It's just what I know how to do." A silence settled between them, comfortable, meaningful. Then she asked, "How long have you been running this place?" 5 years, he replied. "But it's hanging by a thread now. Rent's overdue, tools are breaking. I've been patching things together for months. Why didn't you ask for help?" "Because people with money usually want control," he said simply. "And this place doesn't need control. It needs care." Evelyn's eyes lingered on him. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I do," she smiled softly. "Then you're a better man than most billionaires I've met?" He gave a half smile. "You've met billionaires?" "Only when I look in the mirror," she said quietly. Noah blinked. "You were serious?" "You're that Evelyn Hartman?" "I told you I ran a company." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Wow, and here I thought you were just joking about being able to buy my garage. Would it bother you if I did?" He looked around the workshop, at the kids, the old cars, the grease-stained walls, and then back at her. "If you bought it, it wouldn't be mine anymore." Evelyn nodded slowly. "You're right. Maybe I don't want to buy it. Maybe I want to belong here instead." Her words caught him off guard. "Belong here?" "Teach me," she said, setting down her handbag. "I want to learn what you do." He blinked. "You fix cars?" "Why not? I've fixed companies worth billions. Engines can't be harder." The boys around them chuckled under their breath. Noah looked at her, uncertain whether she was serious, but the determination in her eyes silenced his doubts. "All right," he said, handing her a pair of gloves. "Lesson 1, don't wear heels to a garage." She smiled, slipping them off and standing barefoot on the cold floor. Noted. For the next hour, Evelyn Hartman, the woman who once commanded boardrooms, sat cross-legged beside a broken engine, listening as Noah explained how it worked. She struggled, got her hands dirty, and laughed when oil smudged across her cheek. The boys teased her gently, and for the first time in years, Evelyn laughed without thinking about how it sounded. When they finally finished, Noah handed her a rag. "You did good. I ruined my dress." "Yeah, but you fixed a carburetor." "That's a fair trade," she said, smiling. As the kids left for the day, the garage grew quieter. Noah poured them both coffee from a dented thermos, and they sat on the steps outside. The street glowed orange under the setting sun. "You don't seem like the kind of person who has time for this," he said finally. "I don't," she admitted. "But I've had enough of pretending that time is something I can buy." He studied her carefully. "You ever get tired of being rich?" She chuckled softly. "All the time. It's the loneliest kind of poverty." He turned toward her. "Then why not stop?" "Because people expect me to keep being the woman who never breaks. I built this image, this empire, and now I'm trapped inside it." He looked at her for a long moment before saying, "You don't have to be who they expect. You can just be you." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound easy. It's not. But it's worth it." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the city hum. Then Evelyn said softly, "My husband died 6 years ago. Since then, I've been surrounded by noise, meetings, parties, interviews, but never people. Not like this." Her voice trembled slightly. "Sometimes I wonder if I even know how to connect anymore." Noah's gaze softened. "You just did. Right here." She met his eyes, and something warm spread through her chest. The kind of comfort she hadn't felt in years. Quiet, steady, real. A car horn blared down the street, breaking the moment. Evelyn's chauffeur had arrived, stepping out with the polished stiffness of someone used to protecting status. "Miss Hartman," he called, "your next appointment." She sighed. "Of course." Rising to her feet, she brushed her hands on her dress, leaving faint streaks of grease. Noah grinned. "You might want to tell your driver you've been converted to the dark side," he said. Evelyn smiled. "I think I like the view from here." Before getting into the car, she turned to him. "Noah, thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me what being human feels like." He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. As the car pulled away, she looked back through the window at the small garage fading behind her, a place filled with broken engines and mended souls. And for the first time in her life, Evelyn Hartman envied simplicity more than power. That night, she sat alone in her penthouse, staring at her reflection once again. Her hands were still stained with grease, a smudge of oil near her wrist. Most people would have washed it off immediately. She didn't. Instead, she traced it gently and whispered to her reflection, "Don't forget how this feels, outside." The city lights flickered like scattered stars. But her thoughts were far from the skyline. They were in a small garage, with a man who looked at her like she was more than her fortune. A man who believed that fixing what's broken, whether it's a car or a person, was always worth the mess it made. And somewhere in the silence of that vast, empty apartment, Evelyn realized that maybe love doesn't always arrive wearing suits and promises. Sometimes it walks in with oil-stained hands and the courage to look you straight in the eye, seeing not your power, but your soul. Days turned into weeks, and something inside Evelyn began to change, quietly, like a flower learning how to bloom again after years of drought. Every morning, after her early meetings, she found herself driving back to the same old street where Carter Auto Repairs stood. The first time it had been curiosity, the second an excuse. By the 5th visit, she stopped pretending she needed a reason. Noah never questioned it. He greeted her with that same easy smile every time, handing her gloves and a cup of coffee that tasted too bitter but somehow perfect. The kids in the garage had grown used to seeing her. Miss E, they called her now, and they loved teasing her about how slow she was with tools. "Careful, Miss E," Tyler said one afternoon, laughing. "You're about to strip that bolt again." Evelyn groaned, brushing her hair out of her face. "You say that every time. That's because you do it every time." Noah chimed in from behind her, grinning. She turned around, mock glaring at him. "Maybe I'm just trying to make you feel useful." "Oh, trust me," he said, leaning closer. "You're doing a great job of that." For a heartbeat, their eyes met, and neither of them looked away. The garage noise faded, the laughter dulled. Then one of the kids dropped a wrench with a loud clang, snapping them both out of it. Evelyn quickly turned back to the engine, cheeks flushed. Noah smiled faintly and got back to work. That evening, after the kids had gone, they sat outside again, watching the street lamps flicker to life. A soft wind carried the scent of rain and gasoline. Noah handed her his jacket when he saw her shiver. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "All of it. The empire, the name, the fortune, everything you had to trade for it." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "I used to think success would protect me from loneliness, from loss, from feeling small. But it doesn't. It just gives you better walls to hide behind. And now?" "Now," she said softly, "I think I'm ready to start taking those walls down." Noah nodded slowly. "You don't owe anyone perfection, you know." She smiled sadly. "Tell that to the world." He looked at her with a gentleness that made her heart ache. "Forget the world. Just be here." Her eyes flicked up to his, and something fragile and terrifying began to stir inside her. For the first time in years, Evelyn Hartman wasn't thinking about tomorrow's numbers, or headlines, or expectations. She was thinking about this moment, about him. Then, one stormy night, everything changed. Evelyn was sitting in her office, the city blurred by sheets of rain against the glass. She had just finished a tense call with her board when her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't business. It was a text from Maya. "Ma'am, you need to see this. It's urgent." Attached was a link to a news article. The headline made Evelyn's stomach drop. "Billionaire CEO linked to illegal business shutdown in low-income district. Community outraged." Her eyes widened. The photo below was of Noah's garage. She read the details in disbelief. The city council had approved demolition of several old structures, including Carter Auto Repairs, to make way for a corporate development project. The company funding it? Hartman Industries, her company. "No," she whispered, heart pounding. "No, that can't be right," but it was. The project had been approved months ago, back when she was too busy signing proposals without reading every page. Without realizing the consequences, her chest tightened. "He'll think I knew. He'll think I planned this." She grabbed her coat and ran out into the storm, the rain drenching her within seconds. By the time she reached the street, the garage was lit up, not with its usual warm glow, but with headlights and angry voices. A crowd had gathered. Construction workers in neon vests were marking the ground with red spray paint. Noah stood at the front, shouting over the noise. "You can't do this. This is private property." A man in a city uniform replied coldly, "We have the permits. Demolition starts tomorrow." Evelyn pushed through the crowd, her heart in her throat. "Stop this! Everyone, please stop!" Noah turned, his face a mix of shock and fury. "You?" "Noah, I didn't know," she said, rain streaming down her face. "I swear I didn't know they were doing this." He laughed bitterly. "You didn't know? Evelyn, your company's logo is stamped on every document. You own the people tearing this place apart." "I didn't approve this myself," she pleaded. "It was part of an old expansion deal, something I signed before." "Before what?" he snapped. "Before you decided to play mechanic for a few days and pretend you care about people like us." The words hit her like a slap. "That's not fair," she whispered. "You know me better than that." He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "Do I? Because the woman standing here right now looks a lot like the one destroying everything I've built." The workers started packing up their equipment, leaving only the red lines on the wet pavement, a cruel outline of what tomorrow would erase. Noah turned away, his shoulders heavy. "Noah, please," she said, grabbing his arm. "Let me fix this." He shook his head. "You can't fix everything with money, Evelyn." Not this time. She stood there as he walked away, the rain blurring everything into streaks of silver and grey. The world that once bowed to her power suddenly felt like it was collapsing around her, and for the first time in her life, she couldn't buy her way out. That night she stayed awake in her penthouse. Soaked clothes tossed aside, papers spread across the floor. She went through every file, every contract, every clause, searching for a loophole, a way to stop the demolition. Around 3 a.m., her hands trembled as she found it. The project wasn't irreversible. It could be halted, but at a massive cost. Pulling out would trigger penalties so large it could bankrupt her company. Evelyn stared at the clause for a long time, her breath uneven. Save the company or save him. The next morning, she called a press conference. Reporters flooded the room, microphones flashing like lightning. She stood at the podium, composed but pale. "I have made a decision," she began, voice steady. "Effective immediately, Hartman Industries is withdrawing from the East Side redevelopment project." Gasps filled the room. A journalist shouted, "Ms. Hartman, do you realize this decision could cost your company billions?" "Yes," she said simply, "and it's worth every cent." When the conference ended, she walked out into the sunlight, her heart heavy but her soul lighter than it had been in years. She didn't care about the headlines. She didn't care about the board's fury. All she cared about was the man who taught her that some things are too sacred to put a price on. She drove straight to the garage. The workers were gone. The red lines had already begun to fade in the rain. And there, inside, was Noah, alone, packing tools into a box. He didn't look up as she entered. "If you're here to apologize again, don't." "I'm not," she said softly. "I'm here to tell you it's over." He frowned. "What is?" "The project. The demolition. My company's out." Noah finally turned to face her, eyes wide. You did that?" She nodded. "It'll cost me everything, but I couldn't let them destroy what matters most." He stared at her for a long moment, the anger slowly fading from his face. "You'd really risk all that? For this place?" "For you," she said quietly. The silence between them was thick, charged. Then Noah stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're crazy, you know that?" "Maybe," she said with a small smile. "But maybe I finally did something right, for the first time since the storm began." He smiled back. Not the amused grin she'd seen before, but something deeper, something that said, "I see you." And when he pulled her into his arms, the rest of the world, the noise, the headlines, the chaos, fell away. All that remained was the sound of her heart steady against his, beating for something real at last. Weeks passed since the storm that nearly tore them apart, and yet the memory of that night stayed etched in both their hearts like an old scar that still ached in the rain. The world had moved on. News outlets had found new scandals. Shareholders had cooled their anger, but Evelyn's life had never been the same. Her office looked emptier now. No assistants rushing in with schedules, no executives knocking on her door for approvals. The empire she had built was standing on fragile legs, and she knew it. Yet when she glanced at the framed photo of the garage sitting on her desk, Noah, the kids, the smell of oil and laughter, she felt something she hadn't in decades. Peace. That morning, she stood by the window, watching sunlight creep through the mist over the city. Maya, her loyal assistant, stepped inside. "Miss Hartman," she said softly, "the board wants to meet again. They're pushing for your resignation." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Let them push. I'm done fighting battles that make me forget who I am." Maya hesitated, then nodded. "And the garage? He hasn't called?" "No," Evelyn said quietly, turning back to the window. "And I don't blame him. I broke his trust once, even if I didn't mean to." Maya placed a folder on the desk. "You asked me to look into community rebuilding grants. There's one that fits his program perfectly. If you sign it, Carter Auto Repairs could expand, teach hundreds of kids." Evelyn's eyes softened. "Do it, but make sure he never knows it came from me." That night, while the city glittered beneath her penthouse, she sat alone with her thoughts. Her hands, once perfectly manicured, still bore faint scars from the garage. tiny reminders that even the richest hands could learn to build again. She picked up her phone, scrolled to Noah's name, and hovered her thumb over the call button. Then she sighed and set it down. "Some things," she whispered, "you fix by letting them breathe." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Noah stood in the doorway of his garage, watching the kids rebuild an old car piece by piece. The place looked better now. New tools, new lights, even a new signboard that someone had quietly paid for. He didn't know who the donor was, but deep down, he had a feeling. Every time the wind carried the faint perfume of lavender and rain, his mind drifted to her. "Hey, Noah," Tyler shouted, pulling him out of his thoughts. "Come check this out. We got the engine running." Noah smiled and walked over, clapping the boy on the shoulder. "Told you you'd get it." Machines only listen to people who don't give up. As the motor purred to life, the kids cheered, and for a brief moment, everything felt right again. Yet later that evening, when the laughter faded and he sat alone with the hum of the street outside, the emptiness returned. He looked toward the empty chair where Evelyn used to sit, feet bare, hair messy, eyes bright with curiosity. He missed that version of her, the woman who traded power for purpose. He picked up his phone, typed her name, and deleted it again. "She deserves peace," he thought, "even if it's not with me." A month later, an invitation arrived at his doorstep, a formal envelope sealed with a gold crest. The Hartman Foundation Gala. Noah almost tossed it aside, assuming it was some corporate event. But something about the handwritten note inside stopped him cold. "Every story deserves an ending. E." He stared at the words for a long time before sighing and setting the letter down. "Guess she still knows how to make things complicated," he muttered. When the night of the gala arrived, he stood awkwardly at the edge of the grand ballroom. Everyone there looked like they'd been born wearing diamonds. He, in his plain suit and borrowed tie, felt completely out of place. But then the music slowed, and the crowd parted. Evelyn walked in. The room seemed to pause. She was radiant, not in the cold perfection of wealth, but in the quiet grace of someone who had finally made peace with her reflection. Her gown shimmered like starlight, but her eyes searched the crowd until they found him. "Noah," she said softly, stepping closer. "You came. Wasn't sure I'd fit in," he said with a half-smile. "You fit more than anyone here," she replied. "This isn't about them. It's about what comes next." She led him through the crowd to a small stage where a banner read, "Hartman Foundation for Hands-On Futures." As the room hushed, Evelyn took the microphone. "Tonight," she began, "we're not celebrating success. We're redefining it. True success isn't measured by what we build for ourselves, but what we build for others." She turned toward Noah, her voice trembling slightly. "This foundation will fund community workshops across the city, places like Carter Auto Repairs, where broken things are given a second chance. Where people are given a second chance." The audience erupted in applause, but Evelyn's eyes never left Noah's. When the speech ended, she stepped down, and he met her halfway. "You did all this," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. "I just gave it a name," she replied. "You gave it meaning." He looked at her for a long time, the chaos of the gala fading into a distant hum. "You didn't have to do any of this." "I know," she whispered. "But I wanted to." A pause lingered between them, heavy, uncertain, yet filled with something neither could deny anymore. "I thought you'd moved on," he admitted. "I tried," she said. "But every time I touched a pen, I remembered how it felt to hold a wrench. Every time I walked into a boardroom, I missed the smell of oil and rain. Every time I closed my eyes." She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I saw you." His breath caught. "You don't belong in my world, Evelyn." She stepped closer, her hand finding his. "Maybe not. But maybe I was never meant to stay in mine." And right there, under the golden lights of a world she had once ruled, Evelyn Hartman, once the most powerful woman in the city, chose something no amount of money could ever buy, a life that felt real. Weeks later, the garage buzzed again, not just with engines and laughter, but with a new sense of purpose. A banner above the entrance read, Hartman Carter Youth Workshop. Kids ran in and out, grease on their hands, hope in their eyes. Inside, Evelyn stood beside Noah, showing Tyler how to replace a filter. She was clumsy as ever, but this time no one teased her, they just smiled. The woman who once bought companies now fixed cars, and she couldn't have been prouder. Noah leaned against the wall, watching her with quiet affection. "You know," he said, "you're still terrible with tools." Evelyn smirked. "And you're still terrible at lying," he laughed, shaking his head. "Guess we're both hopeless." "Maybe that's what makes us work," she said softly. Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft, cleansing, familiar. Evelyn stepped to the door, watching the droplets hit the pavement, remembering the first night she'd stopped her car in a storm and met a stranger who saw her not as a CEO, but as a woman who'd forgotten how to feel. She turned to Noah, her eyes shining. Funny how everything started with the rain. He joined her by the doorway, slipping his hand into hers. "Yeah," he said quietly, "except this time we don't run from it." And as the thunder rolled across the city, Evelyn and Noah stood side by side in the open doorway, two souls once broken by the world, now learning how to rebuild it together. One heartbeat, one dream, one drop of rain at a time.